The observation deck of the Galactic Council station hummed with quiet conversations in dozens of languages. Ambassador Zethkri adjusted her crystalline breathing apparatus and watched the humans below, through the transparent aluminum barriers. Her four eyes tracked their movements with scientific precision, noting behavioral patterns that had puzzled xenobiologists for decades. Fascinating creatures, she murmured to her aide, a young Veltar named Yix. They exhibit such contradictory behaviors. Observe how they form small groups yet maintain distance from others of their kind. Yix consulted his datapad, scrolling through behavioral analysis reports. The preliminary studies suggest territorial instincts, Ambassador. Perhaps evolutionary remnants from their predatory past. Zethkri's mandibles clicked in disagreement. No, that cannot be the complete explanation. Look there. She pointed with one of her 6 arms toward a human female who had dropped several data tablets. Immediately, 3 other humans rushed to help her collect them, despite having no apparent prior relationship. If they were purely territorial, such altruistic behavior toward strangers would be counterproductive. The Kethmori ambassador was renowned throughout the galaxy for her analytical mind. Her species had achieved interstellar travel through logic and careful observation, never rushing into conclusions. They were natural scientists, their entire civilization built on understanding the universe through methodical study. This made the humans particularly vexing to her ordered mind. Perhaps we should request a formal interview with one of their representatives, Yix suggested. Direct observation has its limitations. Indeed. Zethkri's attention focused on a particular human seated alone near the far wall. Unlike the others, this one wore different clothing. Not the standard diplomatic attire, but something more practical, more worn. Scars marked his visible skin, and his posture suggested someone accustomed to danger. That one appears different from the others. Note the alert positioning, the way his eyes constantly scan for threats. A warrior, perhaps. The human in question was Marcus Chen, a veteran of the Proxima border conflict and current military liaison to the diplomatic corps. His job was simple: ensure the safety of Earth's ambassadors during these crucial first contact negotiations. What he hadn't expected was to become the subject of alien scientific curiosity. Zethkri made her decision. Rising from her observation post, she moved with the fluid grace of her species toward the human section. Her aide followed, datapad ready to record whatever insights might emerge from direct contact. Marcus noticed her approach long before she reached him. Years of combat had honed his awareness to a razor's edge. He watched the alien ambassador navigate through the crowded space, noting how other species stepped aside respectfully. This was someone important, and she was heading directly toward him. "Greetings," Zethkri said in accented but clear English. Her translator device rendered her natural clicking and whistling into recognizable speech. "I am Ambassador Zethkri of the Kethmori Collective. Might I have a moment of your time?" Marcus stood, offering a respectful nod. "Sergeant Major Marcus Chen, Earth Defense Force, please have a seat." "Ambassador." As they settled into the curved seating designed to accommodate multiple species, Zethkri studied him with undisguised scientific interest. "Your species presents a puzzle that my people find most intriguing, Sergeant Major Chen. We have observed behaviors that seem to contradict your evolutionary development." "How so?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. He had heard that the Kethmori were brilliant scientists, and their interest in humanity was considered a positive sign for future relations. "Your species exhibits both aggressive territorial behavior and remarkable altruism toward complete strangers. You wage wars against your own kind, yet risk your lives to save those same individuals. Your history is filled with conflicts, yet also with incredible acts of self-sacrifice for the greater good." "It is illogical." Marcus considered her words carefully. He had never thought about humanity from an alien perspective before. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," Zethkri replied immediately. "Your motivations, your decision-making processes, the contradictions in your behavior. My people believe that understanding these patterns could help us better predict human actions in our future alliance." "That's assuming we form an alliance," Marcus pointed out. "Indeed. But the galaxy is changing, Sergeant Major. New threats emerge from the outer rim, species that make your territorial conflicts look like children's games. The Council believes that humanity's unique perspective might be valuable in addressing these challenges." Marcus felt a chill at her words. "What kind of threats?" Zethkri exchanged a look with her aide before responding. Perhaps that discussion is premature. First, I would like to understand your species better. Would you be willing to share your experiences with me to help explain these behavioral contradictions? I'm just a soldier, Ambassador. I follow orders and try to keep people alive. I'm not sure I'm the right person to explain all of humanity. On the contrary, she replied, her four eyes focusing on him with intensity. You represent exactly the contradiction I wish to understand. You are trained for violence, yet you dedicate your life to protecting others. You have experienced combat, yet you sit here engaging in peaceful diplomacy. You embody the paradox of your species. Marcus leaned back, processing her request. Around them, the diplomatic chatter continued, various species negotiating trade agreements and territorial boundaries. But he sensed that this conversation might be more important than any of those formal discussions. All right, Ambassador, I'll try to answer your questions. But I should warn you, some of the answers might not make logical sense to your people. Zethkri's mandibles clicked in what he would later learn was amusement. Sergeant Major, if human behavior made logical sense, we would not need this conversation. Please begin wherever you feel comfortable. Marcus thought about where to start. His life had been shaped by conflict, loss, and the bonds forged in impossible circumstances. How could he explain to an alien mind the complexities of human nature? How could he make her understand that their contradictions weren't flaws, but perhaps their greatest strength? Let me tell you about Proxima Station, he began, and why humans do impossible things for people they've never met. As he spoke, neither Marcus nor Zethkri realized that this conversation would set in motion events that would reshape the galactic balance of power. The curious aliens' questions would lead to revelations that would forge an alliance stronger than any in recorded history. Built not on logic or mutual benefit, but on something far more powerful, understanding the true nature of human courage. Marcus settled back in his chair, his eyes growing distant as memories surfaced. Zethkri leaned forward, her crystalline breathing apparatus glinting in the station's artificial light. Her aide Yix prepared his recording device with eager anticipation. Proxima Station was supposed to be a simple outpost, Marcus began, mining operation on the edge of human space. 300 civilians, mostly families of the workers. The company thought it was safe out there, far from any conflict zones. He paused, running a hand through his graying hair. They were wrong. The Kethmori ambassador waited patiently. Her species valued thorough explanations, understanding that context was crucial to comprehending complex behaviors. The hegemony hit us without warning. Their ships came out of nowhere, 50 vessels against our 12 defenders. Military doctrine said we should have evacuated immediately, abandoned the station to save what lives we could. Marcus's voice hardened. But there were families down there, children. Your species has protocols for such situations, yes? Zethkri inquired. Logical procedures to minimize casualties? We do. And every regulation, every tactical manual, every bit of training said the same thing. Retreat. Save the fleet. Don't throw good lives after bad. Marcus met her gaze directly. We ignored every single order. Yix looked up from his datapad, confused. You disobeyed your superiors? Was this not punishable? Oh, it was. Court-martial, imprisonment, complete disgrace. But here's what your data probably doesn't show about humans, Ambassador. Sometimes we decide that some things are more important than rules. Zethkri's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. This is what puzzles us. Your species has complex social structures, hierarchies, laws. Yet you regularly violate these structures when logic would dictate adherence. It creates chaos, does it? Marcus asked. Let me tell you about Captain Sarah Morrison. She was commanding officer of the frigate Determination. When the evacuation order came through, she could have pulled back with the rest of the fleet. Instead, she positioned her ship between the station and the enemy assault force. Marcus stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the various alien ships docked at the station. Morrison had a crew of 40. The ship could have carried maybe 60 in an emergency evacuation. There were 300 people on that station. The mathematics are clear, Zethkri observed. Saving 40 trained personnel would be more valuable than attempting to save 300 civilians. That's exactly what Command told her over the comm. And you know what she said back? Marcus turned to face the alien diplomat. Command, this is Morrison. Mathematics never tucked my daughter into bed. Determination is staying put. The silence stretched for several moments. Zethkri processed this information, trying to fit it into her understanding of logical behavior patterns. Her daughter was on the station, she concluded. No, Marcus said quietly. Morrison's daughter was safe on Earth, 200 light-years away. She had never seen those kids before in her life. But that didn't matter to her. They were children and she was in a position to protect them. Yix's recording device trembled in his hands. What happened to her ship? The determination lasted 47 minutes against overwhelming odds. Morrison and her crew bought enough time for the evacuation shuttles to get the families to safety. Every single civilian made it out alive. Marcus returned to his seat. Morrison and her crew didn't. Zethkree's 4 eyes studied Marcus intently. And the other ships? Did they also violate orders? Every last one. 12 ships against 50. Protecting people they had never met would never meet. We lost 8 vessels that day, including the Determination. But those 300 civilians lived because 40 crews decided that saving strangers was worth dying for. This is inefficient, Zethkree stated. Though her tone suggested confusion rather than judgment, your species sacrificed valuable military assets and trained personnel for individuals with no strategic importance. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien ambassador. You want to understand humans, Ambassador? Here's the thing your analysis is missing. Those people weren't strangers to us. They were us. I do not understand this distinction. When Captain Morrison looked at those kids on the station, she didn't see random civilians. She saw her daughter. When Lieutenant Torres saw the miners trying to get their families to the shuttles, he saw his own parents. When I saw that evacuation, I saw every person I had ever sworn to protect. Marcus leaned forward, his voice growing intense. We don't save people because it's logical, Ambassador. We save them because we can't live with ourselves if we don't. Because somewhere in our DNA, in our culture, in whatever makes us human, we've decided that the life of a stranger is worth the same as the life of someone we love. Zethkree sat back, her breathing apparatus cycling rapidly. This connection you describe to unknown individuals, it is not based on genetic relation or social bonds. Not in the way you mean, no. But humans have this concept called empathy. We can look at another person and imagine their pain, their fear, their hope. We can feel what they feel even if we've never spoken to them. And this emotional response overrides logical self-preservation every single time, Marcus confirmed. When push comes to shove, humans will die for complete strangers without hesitation. We'll throw ourselves into impossible situations, sacrifice everything we have just to give someone else a chance at life. Yix looked up from his frantic note-taking. But surely this cannot be universal behavior. Your species has conflicts, wars among yourselves. Marcus nodded grimly. Oh, we do. Humans can be the most savage creatures in the galaxy. When we think someone we care about is threatened, we'll fight each other over resources, territory, ideology. But here's the strange part. Often we'll fight to protect people who aren't even part of our group. Explain, Zethkree requested. During the Martian Civil War, Earth forces intervened not to support either side, but to protect civilian populations caught in the crossfire. We took casualties from both sides, made enemies of everyone involved just to keep innocents safe. Made no strategic sense whatsoever. Yet you did it anyway. We did it anyway, Marcus confirmed. Because at the end of the day, we'd rather be the species that tries to save everyone than the one that makes logical calculations about who deserves to live. Zethkree was quiet for several minutes, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she spoke. This behavioral pattern, it explains many of the inconsistencies we have observed, but it also raises new questions, such as, if your species is willing to sacrifice so much for strangers, what would you do for allies? For friends? She paused, her 4 eyes focusing on him with laser intensity. What would humanity do if faced with a threat to the entire galaxy? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine at Zethkree's question. The way she had phrased it suggested more than academic curiosity. Ambassador, are you asking hypothetically? Or is there something specific you're worried about? Zethkree exchanged another meaningful glance with her aide. The young Veltar's skin had shifted to a pale blue, which Marcus had learned indicated anxiety among their species. Perhaps it would be better if I explained why the Galactic Council is so interested in forming an alliance with humanity. She said carefully, your species has been in space for less than 2 centuries. Most civilizations require millennia to develop interstellar capability, yet you have achieved remarkable technological advancement in an impossibly short time. We're fast learners, Marcus replied, but he sensed there was more to her concern. Indeed, but it is not your technology that interests us most. Zethkri stood and walked to the observation window, gesturing toward the various alien vessels docked outside. Every species you see represented here achieved their current status through careful planning, logical progression, and above all, caution. We expand slowly, establish secure territories, ensure our survival before taking risks. She turned back to Marcus. Humans do the opposite. You rush headlong into danger. Explore unknown regions, push boundaries that other species avoid. Your entire expansion into space has been driven by what you call curiosity, and what we call reckless endangerment. Marcus joined her at the window. And that scares you? It terrifies us, she admitted. But it also represents something we have never encountered before. A species capable of rapid adaptation and willing to take extraordinary risks. These qualities may be exactly what the galaxy needs. For what? Zethkri was quiet for a long moment, studying the star field beyond the station. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something at the galactic rim. Ships using technology we do not recognize, moving in patterns that suggest aggressive expansion. They have already consumed 12 star systems. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Consumed? Completely stripped of all useful materials. Planets reduced to barren rock. Stars dimmed by massive energy harvesting operations. No survivors, no attempts at communication. No apparent interest in anything except resources. Zethkri's voice carried a weight that transcended species barriers. We call them the Devourers. How long before they reach inhabited systems? Our projections suggest 18 months before they encounter the outer colonies of the Veltar Confederation. 2 years before they reach major population centers. She turned to face him fully. The Council has spent weeks debating response strategies. Every simulation, every tactical analysis suggests the same outcome, which is total annihilation of galactic civilization as we know it. Marcus sank back into his chair, processing the implications. What kind of numbers are we talking about? Yix consulted his datapad. Initial estimates suggest a fleet of over 10,000 vessels, each significantly larger than our largest dreadnoughts. Their technology appears to be at least 3 centuries ahead of our own. They move faster than our fastest ships and show no signs of slowing down. And the Council's plan? Evacuation, Zethkri said simply. Preserve what we can, fall back to the galactic core, hope they lose interest in heavily defended systems and move on to easier targets. Marcus stared at her. You're talking about abandoning billions of people. We are talking about preserving civilization itself, she replied. It is the logical response to an insurmountable threat, but not the human response. No, Zethkri said quietly. Which is why we need to understand your species better. Because there are voices in the Council suggesting that humanity might approach this problem differently. Marcus stood and began pacing, his military mind automatically shifting into tactical analysis mode. You're right. We would approach it differently, but probably not in a way that would make your people comfortable. Elaborate. Humans don't retreat from impossible odds, Ambassador. We charge straight at them. Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at her. Tell me about their ships. What do we know about their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses? That is classified Council information, Yix interjected nervously. Zethkri silenced him with a gesture. Their vessels appear to be heavily automated, possibly completely unmanned. They show perfect coordination but no adaptability. They strip resources systematically but show no interest in conquest or control. They simply consume and move on. Like a swarm, Marcus mused. A very advanced, very dangerous swarm. Yes, and swarms have historically proven nearly impossible to defeat through conventional warfare. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, his mind working through possibilities. Finally, he looked up at the alien ambassador. You want to know how humans would handle this threat? We'd do something completely insane. Such as? We'd find their source, their home base, their control center, whatever's directing this swarm, and then we'd fly straight into the heart of it and blow it up. Yix's skin shifted to a darker blue. That would be suicide. Probably, Marcus agreed. But it would also be our best chance of stopping them. You said they show perfect coordination? That suggests centralized control. Take out the brain and the body dies. The logistics alone would be impossible, Zethkri protested. You would need to penetrate unknown territory, evade a fleet of 10,000 ships, locate a target that might not even exist, and somehow survive long enough to destroy it. The odds would be astronomical. Marcus smiled grimly.
Ambassador, let me tell you about the Battle of Marathon.
2,500 years ago, a small Greek force faced a Persian army 10 times their size. Everyone knew it was hopeless. Everyone knew they were going to die. But you know what they did? I am not familiar with this historical event. They charged, straight into impossible odds, knowing they couldn't win, because someone had to make a stand. And against all logic, against all probability, they won. Marcus's voice grew stronger. That's what humans do. We look at impossible situations and find a way to make them possible. But the cost would be enormous, Marcus acknowledged. Thousands of ships, millions of lives, everything we could throw at them. But here's what you need to understand about humanity, Ambassador. We'd rather die fighting an impossible battle than live knowing we could have tried and didn't. Zethkri processed this information, her scientific mind struggling with the emotional logic of human behavior. And if you failed? If humanity threw everything at this threat and was destroyed in the process, then at least we'd give the rest of the galaxy time to figure out another solution. Maybe our sacrifice would provide enough data for your people to find a different approach. Marcus met her gaze steadily. But we wouldn't fail. How can you be so certain? Because we're too stubborn to die quietly, Ambassador. And because we've learned something that your people apparently haven't. Which is, sometimes the impossible is just the improbable waiting for someone crazy enough to try. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Yix's communication device. The young Veltar glanced at the message and his skin immediately shifted to a deep purple that Marcus had never seen before. Ambassador, Yix whispered urgently. Priority message from the council chambers. The Devourer fleet has accelerated. They're moving faster than projected. Zethkri's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed this information. How much faster? Twice the previous rate. The revised timeline puts them at Veltar space in 8 months, not 18. Marcus watched the aliens' distress with growing concern. What's changed? Unknown. Our monitoring stations lost contact 6 hours ago. The last transmission showed the entire fleet changing course and increasing velocity significantly. Zethkri's voice carried a weight that transcended species barriers. They're coming straight toward the galactic core now. 6 hours ago, Marcus repeated. That's when the council session started, isn't it? When all the species representatives gathered here. The implication hit Zethkri immediately. You think they detected our gathering? I think they've been watching us longer than anyone realized. And I think they just decided to speed up their timeline. Marcus stood, his military instincts fully engaged. Ambassador, I need to speak with Earth Command immediately, and you need to call an emergency council session. What are you thinking, Sergeant Major? I'm thinking we just ran out of time for careful planning and logical debate. If they're targeting the core systems, they know exactly what they're doing. This isn't random consumption anymore. It's strategic warfare. As if summoned by their conversation, the station's emergency alert system activated. Red lights began flashing throughout the observation deck, and an automated voice announced in multiple languages. All diplomatic personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Within minutes, the deck had transformed from a casual meeting space into a command center. Representatives from dozens of species huddled around holographic displays, showing the latest intelligence reports. The mood was grim. Commander Sarah Kim, Earth's chief diplomatic representative, approached Marcus with a tablet in her hand. Chen, I need you to brief the Council on human military capabilities. They're asking what we can contribute to a defensive alliance. Commander, with respect, defense isn't what we should be discussing right now. Explain. Marcus gestured toward the tactical displays. Look at their movement pattern. They've been observing us, learning our positions, our capabilities. The acceleration isn't random. They're responding to our gathering here. They know we're forming an alliance and they're moving to prevent it. Commander Kim studied the data. You're suggesting they see us as a threat? I'm suggesting they see us as something worth preventing. Which means they think we might actually be able to stop them. Across the deck, Zethkri was engaged in heated discussion with representatives from the hegemony, the Veltar Confederation and the Crystalline Collective. Marcus could see the frustration in their body language even across species barriers. The debate is not going well. Yix appeared beside them, his skin now a mottled combination of colors indicating extreme stress. The hegemony insists on immediate evacuation. The collective wants to fortify core systems. The Veltar are advocating for negotiation attempts. And the Kethmori? Marcus asked. Ambassador Zethkri is arguing for your approach, a direct assault on their control systems. She is not finding much support. Marcus looked around the deck at the various alien representatives. Brilliant minds, all of them, but constrained by millennia of careful logical thinking. Yix, how much do you know about human military history? Only what is in the public records. Why do you ask? Because I think it's time your people learned about something we call a Hail Mary pass. Commander Kim raised an eyebrow. Chen, what are you planning? Nothing yet, Commander. But I think we need to show them exactly what human military doctrine looks like when everything else has failed. Marcus walked over to the central tactical display, drawing the attention of the assembled diplomats. May I have everyone's attention? The conversations gradually died down as dozens of alien eyes turned toward him. He had never addressed such a gathering before, and the weight of the moment wasn't lost on him. I've been listening to your debates, and I understand your concerns. Evacuation, fortification, negotiation, all logical responses to an overwhelming threat. Marcus gestured toward the display showing the Devourer fleet. But you're thinking about this the wrong way. Counselor Vex of the Hegemony spoke up, his translator rendering his natural hissing into crisp English. Please enlighten us, human. What perspective are we missing? You're treating this like a natural disaster, something to survive, to weather, to endure. But this isn't a hurricane or an earthquake. This is an enemy force, and enemies can be defeated. The technological disparity makes victory impossible, stated Representative Quell of the Crystalline Collective. Logic dictates preservation over feudal resistance. Marcus smiled grimly. Representative, let me tell you about the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartan warriors against a Persian army of hundreds of thousands. Completely impossible odds. The Spartans knew they were going to die. He manipulated the display to show tactical formations, but they didn't fight to win. They fought to delay, to buy time for their allies to prepare, to prove that the enemy could be hurt, could be stopped, even if only temporarily. And they all died, Counselor Vexith pointed out. Yes, they did, but their sacrifice inspired the entire Greek world to unite against the invaders. What looked like a certain Persian victory became one of history's greatest military defeats. Marcus looked around the assembled delegates. Sometimes losing the battle is the only way to win the war. Zethkri moved closer to the display. You are proposing a deliberate sacrifice. I'm proposing we stop thinking like prey and start thinking like predators. The Devourers are fast, efficient, and overwhelming, but they're also predictable. They follow patterns, respond to stimuli, adapt slowly to changing conditions. Marcus began highlighting sectors on the tactical map. What if we gave them exactly what they expect to see? A logical defensive response, fortified positions, evacuation routes, predictable retreat patterns, and while they're busy consuming those obvious targets, a strike force penetrates their formation to locate and destroy their command structure, Zethkri finished. Exactly. It's called a feint. Make them look one way while you hit them from another. The chamber erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. Some species representatives were intrigued, others appalled, all struggling to process the fundamentally different approach to warfare that Marcus had presented. Commander Kim stepped beside him. Chen, you realize what you're suggesting would require incredible coordination between species that have never fought together before. Yes, Commander. And it would require some of us to knowingly fly into certain death to give the strike force a chance. Marcus looked out at the alien faces surrounding him. The question is, are any of your people willing to die for strangers the way humans are? The silence that followed was profound. And in that silence, Marcus saw the beginning of understanding in Zethkri's 4 eyes. She was starting to grasp not just what humans would do, but why they would do it. And more importantly, she was beginning to believe it might actually work. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of being the first human to address the full assembly. The vast chamber, designed to accommodate the diverse physiological needs of dozens of species, felt surreal as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. Zethkri had spent the intervening time briefing key council members on their conversation. The response had been mixed, with predictable divisions along cultural lines. The more militaristic species showed cautious interest, while the traditional pacifist civilizations recoiled from the proposal. Honored delegates, Marcus began, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. 3 days ago, I was a simple soldier assigned to guard diplomats. Today, I stand before you asking you to consider something that goes against every logical instinct your species possess. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as translators rendered his words into dozens of languages. Ambassador Zethkri asked me to explain human behavior, why we act irrationally, why we sacrifice for strangers, why we charge into impossible situations. I told her about battles and heroes, but I realize now that I missed the most important point. Marcus activated the chamber's holographic display system, showing images from human history. We don't do these things because we're brave. We do them because we're terrified. The chamber fell silent. Every human who ever ran into enemy fire was scared. Every mother who ever lifted a car off her trapped child was terrified. Every soldier who ever held a line against overwhelming odds wanted nothing more than to run away. Marcus's voice grew stronger. But we learned something a long time ago. Being afraid isn't the opposite of courage. It's the requirement for it. He gestured toward the tactical display showing the Devourer fleet. You look at this threat and see impossible odds. You calculate survival probabilities and resource allocation. You make logical decisions based on rational analysis. And all of that is exactly what those things out there expect you to do. Counselor Vexith interrupted. Are you suggesting that logic itself is somehow disadvantageous? I'm suggesting that pure logic is predictable, and predictable behavior is exploitable. Marcus manipulated the display to show the Devourer's systematic approach to resource extraction. Look at their pattern. They move methodically, consume completely, advance consistently. It's perfectly logical, perfectly efficient, and therefore perfectly vulnerable to illogical responses, Zethkri added, rising from her position in the Kethmori delegation. If Sergeant Major Chen is correct, their technological superiority is built on the assumption that their opponents will behave rationally. Representative Quell's crystalline form shimmered with agitation. You are asking us to abandon the principles that have guided galactic civilization for millennia, to embrace chaos over order. I'm asking you to embrace hope over certainty, Marcus replied. Your logical approach tells you that this threat will destroy everything you've built. My illogical approach suggests that maybe, just maybe, we can stop them. The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Council's history. Species that had negotiated for centuries through careful protocol and measured discussion found themselves arguing about concepts like sacrifice, honor, and desperate gambles. During a recess, Marcus found himself surrounded by a small group of military advisors from various species. General Korath of the Veltar military was studying tactical projections with obvious interest. Your proposal has merit, the reptilian commander admitted, but the coordination required would be staggering. Our species have never attempted joint military operations on this scale. That might actually work in our favor, Marcus suggested. The Devourers have been observing galactic civilization for months, maybe years. They know how each of our species fights individually. They won't be prepared for a completely unprecedented combined operation. Captain Thiss of the Hegemony Navy, her scaled head crest flattened in concentration, added, The sacrifice you propose. My people understand honor in battle, but to deliberately send ships to certain destruction requires a level of commitment that even we find challenging. It requires trust, Marcus said simply. Trust that the mission matters more than individual survival. Trust that your sacrifice will serve a purpose. Trust that someone will remember what you did and why you did it. Zethkri approached the group. The council is reconvening. The preliminary vote is closer than expected. They returned to the chamber to find the delegates in intense discussion. The Kethmori, Veltar, and human delegations had formed an unofficial alliance supporting the direct assault plan. Several smaller species had joined them, while the major powers remained divided. Elder San of the Crystalline Collective rose to address the assembly. We have heard passionate arguments for this human approach to warfare, but we must consider the broader implications. If we fail, galactic civilization dies with us. Is it not better to preserve what we can? Elder San, Marcus said, requesting permission to respond. May I ask you something? The crystalline being's form shifted to indicate attention. In your species' long history, has there ever been a moment when you chose preservation over principle? When you survived by abandoning others who needed your help? The chamber grew very quiet. Elder San's crystalline structure remained motionless for several long moments. There have been difficult decisions, the elder finally admitted. And how do your people remember those decisions now? Another long pause. With regret. Then you understand what I'm trying to tell you. We can choose to survive this by running away, by hiding, by letting others die while we preserve ourselves. And if we succeed, we'll spend the rest of our existence knowing that we chose survival over everything else that makes life worth living. Marcus looked around the chamber. Or we can choose to fight. Maybe we'll lose. Probably we'll lose. But at least we'll lose as the people we want to be, not the people we settled for being. The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone had expected. The motion to approve a joint military operation based on human tactical doctrine passed by exactly 3 votes as the delegates began filing out to prepare for what many of them saw as the last coordinated action of galactic civilization. Zethkri approached Marcus. You realize what you have done? She asked. Started a war we can't win? Gave us something we had forgotten we possessed, she corrected. Hope. Marcus looked out through the chamber's massive viewport at the starfield beyond. Somewhere out there, an implacable enemy was advancing toward everything they had ever cared about. Ambassador, can I ask you something that's been bothering me? Of course. Why did your people really want to understand human behavior? This threat has been coming for months. You could have formed a defensive alliance without us. Why specifically seek out humanity? Zethkri's mandibles clicked in what he now recognized as contemplation. Because in all our observations of your species, we noticed something that we found both fascinating and terrifying, which was, humans are the only species we have ever encountered that becomes more dangerous when faced with impossible odds. Every other civilization becomes more cautious, more conservative, more focused on preservation. But humans, she paused, studying him with her 4 eyes. Humans become reckless, innovative, and absolutely unpredictable. And you thought that might be useful? I thought it might be our only hope. As they watched the last delegates leave the chamber, neither of them spoke about the weight of what they had just set in motion. In 64 hours, the greatest fleet in galactic history would launch toward an enemy that had never been successfully challenged, and at its heart would be a strategy that no logical mind would ever approve of, led by a species that had turned illogical courage into an art form. The Joint Fleet Assembly Point was designated as Nexus Station, a massive construction facility located in neutral space between the major powers. Marcus had never seen anything like it. Ships from dozens of species arranged in formation patterns that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. He stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced dreadnought, watching as alien vessels took their positions in the battle formation, Kethmori science vessels with their distinctive crystalline hulls. Veltar heavy cruisers built like floating fortresses, hegemony strike ships sleek and predatory. Even the peaceful crystalline collective had contributed vessels, their ships gleaming like living jewels in the void. Impressive sight, Admiral Chen remarked, joining Marcus at the observation deck, though I never thought I'd see the day when humans were leading a galactic fleet into battle. Marcus nodded, still processing the surreal nature of their situation. Admiral, can I ask you something? Do you really think this plan has a chance? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical displays. Honestly? From a purely strategic standpoint, we're attempting something that should be impossible. But I've learned something in my 40 years of military service. What's that? The impossible and the improbable look exactly the same right up until the moment they don't. A communication request came through from the Kethmori flagship. Zethkri's image appeared on the main screen, her 4 eyes showing the strain of the past few days of preparation. Admiral Chen, Sergeant Major Marcus, I wanted to update you on our intelligence analysis of the Devourer formation. What have you learned, Ambassador? Our combined sensor networks have identified what appears to be a command nexus at the center of their fleet. A vessel significantly larger than the others, heavily shielded and displaying unique energy patterns. Zethkri's mandibles clicked rapidly. We believe this is the control center you theorized about. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. Distance from the fleet perimeter? Approximately 4,000 kilometers, surrounded by an estimated 800 vessels in defensive formations. Admiral Chen whistled low. That's a lot of ships to fight through. Which brings me to the difficult part of this update, Zethkri continued. Our tactical analysis suggests that a strike force would need to penetrate at least 6 defensive layers to reach the command vessel. The probability of any ship surviving that approach is effectively 0, Marcus finished. We know, Ambassador. We've always known. Then why proceed? It was Admiral Chen who answered. Because somebody has to try. And because humans have a saying, the only way to guarantee failure is to never attempt success. Over the next 6 hours, the final preparations were completed. The fleet organized into 3 groups. The main force, designed to engage the Devourer fleet in open battle and draw their attention. The support squadrons, tasked with rescue operations and tactical flexibility. And the strike force, consisting of 12 ships from 6 different species, all volunteers, all knowing they wouldn't be coming home. Marcus found himself assigned to the strike force as senior tactical advisor. As he prepared to transfer to the smaller vessel Last Chance, he was surprised to find Zethkri waiting for him in the docking bay. Ambassador, what are you doing here? I have requested transfer to the strike force as Kethmori representative, she announced. That's not necessary, and it's certainly not safe. Her mandibles clicked, and what he had learned was amusement. Sergeant Major, 3 days ago I asked you to explain human behavior. You told me about sacrifice, about courage, about doing impossible things for strangers. Did you think I was simply collecting academic data? Marcus stared at her. You're not human, Ambassador. You don't have to do this. You are correct. I do not have to. I choose to. She looked out at the assembled strike force. My people have spent millennia believing that logic and caution were the highest virtues. But you have shown me something we had forgotten. Sometimes the most logical thing to do is something completely illogical. As they transferred to the Last Chance, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The strike force was a motley collection of volunteers from species that had barely worked together before. Captain Tavara of the Veltar commanded the operation, her reptilian features set in grim determination. Commander Zaris of the Hegemony brought their advanced stealth technology. The Crystalline Collective's Captain Illuminate contributed weapon systems that bent physics in ways Marcus didn't pretend to understand. And at the heart of it all, 12 crews who had volunteered to die for people they had never met, based on a plan that violated every principle of sensible military doctrine. Strike force reports ready, Captain Tavara announced as they reached the predetermined jump point. Main fleet engagement begins in 30 minutes. Through the viewports, they could see the Devourer fleet in the distance. A massive, perfectly organized formation that moved with the precision of a machine. It was beautiful in its own way and absolutely terrifying. All crews, this is Admiral Chen, came the voice over the communication system. In 5 minutes, we're going to attempt something that has never been tried before in galactic history. Multiple species working as one, fighting for something bigger than ourselves. The Admiral paused, and when he continued, his voice carried across the language barriers with unmistakable conviction. I want every being on every ship to remember this moment. Whatever happens out there, we chose to stand together. We chose to fight instead of flee. We chose hope over fear. Marcus looked around the bridge of the Last Chance. Alien faces, all showing the same mixture of terror and determination that he felt in his own chest. Strike force, prepare for insertion, Captain Tavara ordered. Remember, our job is to reach that command ship. Everything else is secondary. Captain, Marcus spoke up. There's something I want to say to the crews. Tavara nodded permission. Marcus activated the ship-wide communication system. This is Sergeant Major Chen. I know most of you are wondering what you're doing here, following a human plan into what looks like certain death. He paused, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 3 days ago, an alien diplomat asked me to explain human behavior. I told her about courage and sacrifice and doing impossible things for strangers. But I think I understand now what she was really asking. The communication channel was silent except for the quiet hum of various life support systems. She was asking if there was anything worth dying for, if there was anything bigger than individual survival, bigger than logic, bigger than the safe choice. Marcus looked out at the approaching enemy fleet. Today we're going to give the galaxy that answer. The main fleet engagement began with a brilliant flash of weapons fire that lit up the void. Thousands of ships from dozens of species opened fire simultaneously on the Devourer formation, creating a light show that could probably be seen from several star systems away. As planned, The Devourer fleet responded with mechanical precision, repositioning to engage the threat with overwhelming force. Their attention was completely focused on the main battle. Strike Force. Initiate stealth approach, Captain Tavara ordered. 12 ships, representing the best technology and bravest crews of 6 different species, began their approach toward the heart of the enemy formation. Their mission was simple: reach the command ship and destroy it before the Devourers realized what was happening. The execution, of course, would be anything but simple. 3,600 kilometers to target, reported the navigation officer. Marcus watched the tactical display as they slipped between the massive Devourer vessels, undetected for now but moving deeper into a formation that would soon become a death trap. "Ambassador," he said quietly to Zethkri, "when this is over, if anyone asks what humans are like, what will you tell them?" Zethkri studied the approaching enemy command ship through the viewport. "I will tell them that humans are the species that taught the galaxy how to choose hope over certainty. And if we don't make it, then I will tell them anyway from whatever comes after this life." The strike force had penetrated 3 layers of the Devourer formation when everything went wrong. "Multiple contacts converging on our position," reported Lieutenant Kess from the sensor station. "They've detected us." Marcus watched the tactical display as dozens of enemy vessels began changing course, moving to intercept the strike force with mechanical precision. The plan had always acknowledged this moment would come. The question was whether they could reach the command ship before being overwhelmed. "All ships, emergency acceleration," Captain Tavara ordered. "We run the gauntlet now." The next few minutes were pure chaos. Devourer ships materialized from every direction, their weapon systems charging with ominous energy buildups. The strike force scattered into evasive patterns, each ship using its species' unique capabilities to survive the incoming storm. The hegemony vessel Serpent Strike used its advanced stealth systems to vanish between volleys, reappearing to deliver devastating hits before disappearing again. The crystalline collective ship Radiance seemed to bend space around itself, deflecting incoming fire through gravitational manipulation that Marcus's mind couldn't fully process. But they were taking losses. The Veltar heavy cruiser Iron Will absorbed too many hits protecting the smaller vessels, and died in a brilliant explosion that lit up the void. The Last Chance shuddered as enemy fire found their hull, and Marcus felt the deck plating buckle beneath his feet. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. "Sealing emergency bulkheads. Distance to target?" Captain Tavara demanded. 800 kilometers and closing, came the reply. Through the chaos of the battle, Marcus could see their target, the massive command vessel at the heart of the Devourer formation. It was larger than anything he had ever seen, easily the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and surrounded by defensive fields that shimmered like heat mirages. "Strike Force, this is Admiral Chen," came the voice over the communication system, barely audible through the static of jamming fields. "Main fleet is taking heavy casualties. Whatever you're going to do, do it now." Marcus realized they weren't going to make it. The mathematics were simple. Too many enemy ships, too much distance to cover, too much firepower concentrated against them. But as he watched the tactical display, he noticed something. "Captain, look at their defensive pattern," he called out. "They're positioning to protect against multiple attackers." Tavara studied the display. "Your point? They're expecting all of us to attack together. What if we don't?" Understanding dawned in the reptilian captain's eyes. "You're suggesting a final sacrifice play?" "I'm suggesting we give them exactly what they don't expect." Marcus activated the communication system. "All ships, this is Chen, new plan. Last Chance makes the final run alone. Everyone else forms a defensive screen and holds them off as long as possible." The response was immediate and unanimous rejection from every ship. "Captain." "Negative," came Commander Zaris's voice from the Serpent Strike. "We go together or not at all." "With respect, Commander, that's human thinking, not tactical thinking," Marcus replied.
"If we all attack together, they'll destroy us all before we reach the target."
"But if one ship gets through while the others provide distraction, the probability of success is still minimal," Zethkri pointed out from beside him. "But not zero," Marcus insisted. "And sometimes not zero is all you need." Captain Tavara made the decision. "Strike Force, implement Plan Omega. All ships except Last Chance form defensive positions around the target zone. We buy them as much time as we can. What followed was the most intense battle in galactic history. 11 ships from 6 different species formed a protective barrier around the Last Chance, trading their lives for precious seconds. The Radiance used its gravitational weapons to create a corridor through the enemy formation. The Serpent Strike appeared and disappeared like a ghost, drawing fire away from the main target. The remaining Veltar and Kethmori vessels formed a shield wall that absorbed punishment that should have destroyed ships twice their size. And through it all, the Last Chance accelerated toward the command vessel, her hull glowing from the heat of atmospheric entry into the enemy ship's defensive. Fields 400 kilometers, reported. Navigation 300, 200, the enemy command. Ship was growing larger in the viewports, revealing details that would have been impossible to see from a distance. It wasn't just a ship. It was a massive construct, clearly not built by any known species. Its surface writhed with organic-looking patterns, and Marcus realized with growing horror that they might not be dealing with technology at all. 100 kilometers. Weapons range achieved. Fire everything, Captain Tavara ordered. Every weapon on the Last Chance discharged simultaneously. Human plasma cannons, Veltar mass drivers, Kethmori quantum disruptors, all focused on a single point on the command vessel's hull. For a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then the enemy ship's surface began to crack. "It's working!" Someone shouted over the noise of failing systems and incoming fire. But Marcus could see on the tactical display that they weren't going to have time for a second volley. Enemy ships were converging on their position from every direction. They had maybe 30 seconds before being overwhelmed. "Captain, can we ram it?" Tavara looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "The structural damage alone would kill us all, yes, but it might also finish what we started." Marcus met her reptilian gaze steadily. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop worrying about surviving. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the sounds of systems failing under enemy fire. Then Captain Tavara began entering commands into the navigation system. "All hands, prepare for collision," she announced shipwide. "It has been an honor serving with you all." The Last Chance turned toward the wounded command vessel and began its final acceleration. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the cracks in the enemy hull spreading, revealing some kind of organic interior that pulsed with unnatural light. "Zethkri," Marcus said quietly, "if anyone asks what happened here, tell them we chose to be heroes instead of survivors." The Kethmori ambassador's mandibles clicked one final time. "I will tell them that humans taught us there are things worth dying for." The collision happened at 17% of light speed. The Last Chance struck the command vessel's weakened hull and penetrated deep into its interior before the ship's fusion reactor breached containment. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away and completely vaporized both vessels. But more importantly, it worked. Across the entire Devourer fleet, ships began to slow, their perfect coordination dissolving into random drift. Without their command nexus, the individual vessels became exactly what Marcus had hoped. Sophisticated machines without direction, purpose, or unified intelligence. The main fleet, which had been facing imminent destruction, found itself fighting confused and isolated enemy units instead of a coordinated force. One by one, the Devourer ships were disabled or destroyed by the combined galactic fleet. The battle lasted another 4 hours, but the outcome was decided in the moment the Last Chance proved that the impossible was just another word for something nobody had tried yet. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood once again in the observation deck of the Galactic Council Station. But this time he wasn't alone. The deck was filled with beings from dozens of species, all wearing variations of military decorations that hadn't existed before the war. "The memorial is beautiful," Zethkri said, joining him at the observation window. Outside, a massive crystalline structure rotated slowly in space, inscribed with the names of everyone who had died in the battle against the Devourers. "You survived," Marcus observed. "I thought you were on the Last Chance." "I was. But at the last moment, Captain Tavara ordered me to transfer to an escape pod. She said someone needed to survive to tell the story." Zethkri's 4 eyes focused on the memorial. "I think she understood that the story itself was as important as the victory." Marcus nodded. "And what story will you tell?" "The true one, that when faced with impossible odds, a group of strangers from different worlds chose to become something more than the sum of their parts." That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. She paused, watching as a group of young beings from various species, students, Marcus realized, gathered around a holographic display showing the battle. I will tell them that humans gave the galaxy something we had forgotten we needed, not technology or tactics or strategic thinking. Hope. The simple, illogical, absolutely irrational belief that tomorrow can be better than today if we're willing to fight for it. Marcus watched the students, seeing wonder in their alien faces as they learned about the battle. And do you think they'll understand? Some will. And they'll teach others. And eventually, the galaxy will be full of beings who learned from humans that the most important victories are the ones everyone says are impossible. As they stood together, watching the memorial rotate in the void, Marcus reflected on the curious alien who had asked him to explain human behavior. She had wanted to understand contradictions, illogical actions, the strange choices that humans made when faced with impossible situations. He thought she understood now. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactics or their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. It was their ability to look at strangers and see family, to look at impossible odds and see opportunity, to look at certain death and see a chance to make sure others lived. The galaxy had learned something from humanity in those desperate days, something that would echo through the generations and shape how entire civilizations approach the challenges ahead. They had learned that sometimes the most logical thing to do is something completely illogical, and sometimes that makes all the difference.